The rain came down hard that Thursday evening, the kind that turns headlights into blurs and makes every sensible person pull over. Jade Ellison wasn't sensible. She was late. Late for rent, late for her second job, and now late because of traffic backed up on Route 9 outside Columbus, Ohio. She was drumming her fingers on the steering wheel, squinting through the windshield at the line of red taillights, when she saw him. A man standing on the shoulder of the road, soaked through, no umbrella, no hood, just a plain gray t-shirt plastered to his skin and a look on his face like someone who hadn't planned for any of this. She almost kept driving. Almost. But something about the way he stood there, not panicking, not waving frantically, just standing there with quiet dignity in a downpour, made her slow down. Because she rolled her window down and changed both their lives forever. "You need a ride?" she called out over the sound of rain hammering the roof of her 2009 Civic. He turned slowly, like he'd already accepted his situation and wasn't desperate enough to rush. When the light from her dashboard caught his face, Jade felt something shift in her memory, like flipping through an old photo album and stopping on a page you didn't know you still had. He bent slightly to look through the passenger window. Water ran down his jaw and dripped from the tip of his nose. "I'd appreciate that," he said, his voice calm. Almost too calm for a man standing in a downpour on the side of a highway. She unlocked the door. He got in carefully, trying not to drip more than he already was, pulling the door shut with a measured click. "Thank you," he said, turning to look at her. And that's when it hit her. "Wait," she said slowly, her foot still on the brake. "Marcus?" He blinked. Then the corner of his mouth lifted just slightly. "Jade Ellison." She stared. "Marcus Webb?" "In the flesh," he said, glancing down at his soaked shirt. Wet flesh, apparently. She burst out laughing before she could stop herself. Not because it was funny, but because the alternative was sitting there with her mouth open like a fish, which seemed worse. Marcus Webb. She hadn't seen him since 11th grade at Riverside High. He used to sit 2 rows behind her in AP English, always had a book tucked under his arm, always looked like he was thinking about something 3 conversations ahead of everyone else. Quiet kid, careful with words, the type teachers loved and students found hard to read. "What are you doing standing in the rain on Route 9, she asked, finally easing back into traffic. "My car stopped cooperating about a mile back," he said, running a hand over his wet face. "I was walking toward the next exit when the rain made the decision for me to stop." "You were just going to walk in this?" "I didn't want to impose on anyone." Jade glanced sideways at him. That sounded exactly like something the Marcus she remembered would say. Still, she had questions. It had been, 18, 19 years? People changed. She certainly had. She wasn't sure if the changes in her were the kind worth advertising. "Where are you headed?" she asked. He paused, just briefly, but she caught it. "Downtown. I've got a meeting in the morning." "I'm heading that way," she said. "I can drop you at a hotel or wherever you're staying." "I don't want to take you out of your way." "Marcus, you're soaking wet in my passenger seat. We're past worrying about that." He smiled again, quietly, the way she remembered. "Fair enough." The rain drummed on. The wipers swept back and forth. And somewhere between the highway and the city lights beginning to blur through the wet glass, Jade started wondering what life had done with Marcus Webb since Riverside High. The drive downtown took 40 minutes longer than it should have because of the rain, and Jade wasn't sure if that was good or bad. Part of her was glad to have more time. Part of her was painfully aware that her back seat had a laundry bag, 3 empty water bottles, and a pair of work shoes she kept meaning to throw out. Marcus didn't comment on any of it. He sat with his hands folded in his lap like a man who'd learned a long time ago how to be comfortable anywhere. "So," Jade said, keeping her eyes on the road, "last time I saw you, you were headed to some tech program out east." "MIT, he confirmed simply. "Right, and how'd that go?" "It went well." She waited for more. He didn't offer it. "Still a man of many words, I see," she said dryly. He chuckled, low and genuine. "I work in technology, business development, nothing too exciting." "You always were into that stuff," she said, smiling faintly. "Computers, systems, how things connected. Remember that science project in 10th grade? You built something that actually worked while the rest of us were hot gluing painted cardboard together. You built a working water filtration model, he said without missing a beat. She glanced at him. Ish, you remember that? I remember most things. She turned back to the road, oddly warmed by that. What about you? He asked. What did life hand you? She almost laughed. What did life hand her? That was one way to put it. I'm a nursing assistant at Mercy General, she said. Mornings. Then I do bookkeeping 3 evenings a week for a small business owner I know. In between, I'm basically just running. She paused. I've got a daughter. She's 7. Amara. That's a beautiful name. She's a beautiful kid. Jade's voice softened involuntarily whenever she talked about Amara. She couldn't help it. She's the reason for most of it. The 2 jobs, the early mornings, all of it. Her father? Marcus asked, and she appreciated that he asked like someone who actually wanted to understand, rather than someone filling silence. Why not in the picture, she said simply. Hasn't been since she was 2. Marcus nodded and said nothing further. He didn't offer empty condolences or rush sympathy. He just let it sit, and somehow that felt more respectful than anything else he could have said. It's a lot, she admitted. Some days are harder than others, but Amara thinks I'm a superhero, so I figure I should at least try to act like one. You always were, Marcus said quietly. She frowned slightly. What? Stronger than you gave yourself credit for, he said. I remember in junior year, when you lost your grandmother. You came back to school 3 days later and helped organize the fundraiser for the community garden. Everyone else was sitting down and you were moving. Jade was quiet for a moment. She hadn't thought about that in years. And I didn't know you noticed all that, she said. I told you, he replied. I remember most things. The downtown skyline was getting closer now. Amber and white lights smearing through the rain-streaked windshield. Jade slowed at a light and realized she hadn't thought about being late for anything in the last 40 minutes. That was unusual enough to notice. Where are you staying? She asked. He named a hotel. She knew the building. Everyone in Columbus knew the building. It was the kind of glass tower that looked like it had opinions about people who couldn't afford valet parking. She didn't say anything about it. She just drove. Jade didn't think about Marcus Webb again until the next morning. She was in the break room at Mercy General, eating a granola bar and scrolling through nothing on her phone, when a news notification stopped her cold. The headline read, Webb Technologies CEO, Marcus Webb arrives in Columbus for landmark and acquisition deal. There was a photo, gray t-shirt, calm expression, the same face that had sat in her passenger seat dripping rainwater onto her car mat the night before. She put her granola bar down. Webb Technologies. She knew that name. Everyone knew that name. It was on software used by half the hospitals in the country. It was on the list of fastest growing companies 3 years running. Its CEO was famously private, rarely photographed, turned down every magazine profile request, which was exactly why so few people outside the business world could pick him out of a crowd, or off the side of a highway in the rain. She read the article twice, slowly. Marcus Webb, 41, co-founder and CEO of Webb Technologies, estimated net worth. She stopped at the number. Read it again. Put her phone face down on the table and stared at the ceiling. He hadn't said a word. Not one word about any of it. Just, I work in technology, business development. Nothing too exciting. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She picked up cautiously. I wondered how long it would take, Marcus said. You could have told me, she said flatly. You would have treated me differently. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it, because she wasn't entirely sure he was wrong. I just wanted a normal conversation, he said. I don't get many of those. Jade leaned back in her chair, pressing her fingers to her forehead. So the whole stranded in the rain thing was entirely real, he said. The car was a rental. The battery died. And the rain was not part of any plan, and you were the only person who stopped. I almost didn't. I know, he said. I saw you hesitate. Something about that made her chest feel strange. Why are you calling? She asked. A pause. I'd like to take you to dinner, as a thank you. Marcus, You don't owe me anything. I gave you a 40-minute ride. You gave me the first honest conversation I've had in months, he said. That's worth considerably more than a 40-minute ride. She stared at the granola bar wrapper on the table. I'm working tonight. Tomorrow? She almost said no. The reflex was strong. The part of her that had spent years making herself smaller, quieter, less of an imposition on the world, nearly kicked in. But something stopped it. Fine, she said. Dinner. He picked a place that didn't have prices on the menu. Well, Jade knew what that meant. She wore the nicest thing she owned, a navy dress she'd bought for a work Christmas party 2 years ago, and told herself it was fine. She was fine. This was just dinner. Marcus was already there when she arrived, standing near the entrance rather than sitting, which she noticed. He was dressed simply, dark trousers and a fitted jacket. Nothing flashy. He looked like a man making an effort to look like he wasn't trying too hard, and she appreciated the consideration. You look great, he said. I look like someone who raided the back of her closet, she replied honestly. He smiled. I meant it. They were seated in a corner booth, away from the noise. The kind of table reserved for people who want a real conversation. For a while it was easy. They talked about Riverside High, old teachers, in the way the school cafeteria smelled on Fridays, the specific misery of gym class in February. Jade laughed more than she had in months. Real, unguarded laughter, the kind that sneaks up on you. But eventually the small talk ran its course, and Marcus set down his glass and looked at her in that direct way he had. Tell me about the bookkeeping, he said. She blinked. What about it? You said you do it 3 evenings a week for a small business owner. How long have you been doing that? About 4 years. And before that? I had a small accounting practice, she said, shifting slightly. Just solo. I was building it while working part-time at the hospital. Had about 8 clients at one point. What happened to it? She was quiet for a moment. My daughter's father left. Amara was barely 2. I couldn't keep the business going while managing everything alone. So I wound it down, went full-time at the hospital for the stability, and the bookkeeping is just the leftover piece of it. Marcus was quiet, listening. It sounds like a failure when I say it out loud, she added. It doesn't sound like a failure, he said. It sounds like someone who made a sacrifice and never got to go back. She looked at him. Most people just say, oh, that's tough, and move on. I'm not most people. No, she said slowly. You're really not. He leaned forward slightly. If the circumstances had been different, would you have kept building it? Without question, she said, and the certainty in her own voice surprised her. I was good at it. I liked it. There's something satisfying about making order out of chaos on paper. And numbers don't lie to you. They just sit there and tell you exactly what's true. Something in Marcus's expression shifted. Not dramatically, just a quiet settling, like a decision clicking into place behind his eyes. What? She said, watching him. Nothing, he said, just listening. But she got the feeling it was more than that. By the time dessert arrived, something had changed in the atmosphere between them. Not uncomfortable, just weighted, like a conversation that knew it had somewhere important to go. Marcus turned his water glass slowly with his fingers, a habit she'd noticed twice now. I want to be honest with you about something, he said. Please, she said. I could have called for a car last night, a private service. I had my phone. It just needed to dry for a few minutes and it came back on. He looked up at her. When I didn't call because I didn't want to. I was tired. Tired of everything being managed and arranged and handled. I wanted to just stand in the rain for 5 minutes and be a person who needed something without anyone making it into a production. Jade absorbed that slowly. So you stood on the highway in a downpour on purpose. For about 4 minutes. Then it got considerably less philosophical. She laughed despite herself. You haven't changed as much as I thought. Neither have you, he said. And that's not a small thing. She looked at him carefully. What is this, Marcus? Really? Because we haven't seen each other in almost 20 years, and you're sitting here like you've been thinking about all of this for longer than one night. He didn't flinch. I have. Meaning what exactly? He leaned back. I've built something large, genuinely large. And the problem with large things is they attract people who want proximity to the large thing rather than to the person who built it. I've been in rooms full of brilliant, expensive people for years and walked out feeling completely alone. He paused. Last night in your car, with the rain and the pine air freshener, and you telling me about Amara and the 2 jobs and the water filtration model from 10th grade. You brought that up, she pointed out, because I remembered it for a reason. He looked at her steadily. You've always been exactly who you are. No version of you designed to impress anyone. That's rare. I'd forgotten how rare until last night. The restaurant hummed softly around them. Jade looked down at the table. I'm not a project, Marcus, she said quietly. I know that. And I'm not going to pretend I don't notice the difference between your world and mine. I'm not asking you to. Then what are you asking? He was quiet for a long moment. Right now, just this. Dinner, honesty, seeing if the people we used to be still recognize each other. She looked at him for a long time. Then she picked up her dessert fork. Okay, she said, but I'm ordering the chocolate thing. He smiled and it reached all the way to his eyes. Order 2. He called her 2 days later. She was in the hospital parking lot, sitting in her car before the start of her shift, trying to eat a breakfast sandwich before it got cold. I want to make you a proposal, he said. A business one. She stopped chewing. Go ahead. Web Technologies is expanding its financial oversight division. We've been looking for someone to head a regional accounts management team here in Columbus. It's not a Fortune 500 title, but it's a senior role with real authority, real compensation, and real room to grow. She stared through her windshield at a row of parked ambulances. Marcus, before you say no, he continued, I want you to know this wasn't a spontaneous idea. I did research. I spoke to the business owner you do books for. He told me in about 30 seconds that you were the most meticulous, reliable person he'd ever worked with, and that losing you would be devastating. You called Gerald? He confirmed what I already suspected. She pressed her palm flat against the steering wheel. This feels like charity. Then I've explained it poorly, he said, his voice measured. This is a business decision. I need someone sharp, trustworthy and deeply competent. You are all 3. The fact that I know you personally doesn't disqualify you. It just means I had better information than a standard hiring process would have given me. Jade was quiet. There's a full training program. Salary I'll send in writing so it doesn't feel abstract. And I want to be clear. This role would report to the division director, not to me. This wouldn't put you in a position of owing me anything or feeling like I'm watching over you. You thought about all that, she said. I think about most things. She almost smiled at the echo of his earlier words. She pressed her fingers to her mouth, thinking. I have Amara, she said. The role is fully remote 3 days a week. The other 2 are flexible. You thought about that too. Yes. Why? She asked, and her voice came out quieter than she intended. Why does this matter to you? You could hire anyone. A pause, long enough that she thought the line might have dropped. Because, he said finally, you stopped. In the rain, late, with a laundry bag in your back seat and 2 jobs waiting for you, you still stopped. And I think people who do that deserve more than what life has handed them. Jade looked down at the half-eaten sandwich in her lap. Outside, a nurse she recognized crossed the lot, head down against the morning chill. Send me the details, she said softly, in writing. They'll be in your inbox within the hour. When she hung up, she sat in the car for another 5 minutes. Not thinking exactly. More like just letting something settle that had been unsettled for a very long time. Columbus in November is gray and cold and not particularly inspiring, but Jade had stopped noticing the gray. She was in the middle of a video call with the regional accounts team, a group of 11 people spread across 3 states, walking them through a quarterly reconciliation report she'd built from scratch, when her second screen lit up with a message from an internal system. Nice work on the Henderson account. MW. She finished the call, closed her laptop, and sat back in her home office chair, which was new, bought with her own money from her first real paycheck in years. Amara wandered in from the hallway in her school uniform, backpack hanging off one shoulder. Mom, did you eat lunch? I was about to. You said that at noon. Amara planted her hands on her hips in a stance she had absolutely inherited from her mother. Yank, it's 3:15. I'll eat right now. Jade stood, stretching. How was school? Isaiah said my presentation was the best in class. Amara dropped her backpack. He also said the sky's purple sometimes, so I don't fully trust his judgment. Jade laughed all the way to the kitchen. Later that evening, after dinner and homework, and a very serious debate about which bedtime story counted as one story if it had 3 chapters, Jade sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and her phone. She typed a message to Marcus. The Henderson report took me 4 hours. Your finance team has been doing it in 2 days. You might want to look at your processes. His reply came quickly for a man who ran a global company, already flagged. That's exactly why you're there. She set the phone down and looked out the kitchen window at the dark street beyond. Somewhere out there, Route 9 was wet and empty under the November sky. She thought about the version of herself who had almost kept driving that Thursday evening. Too tired, too late, too practical to pull over for a stranger in the rain. She was glad she hadn't been practical. Sometimes the best decisions you make are the ones that don't make sense in the moment. The ones that ask something of you when you have nothing left to give. A pause, a turn of the wheel, a rolled down window in the middle of a downpour. You never know who's standing on the other side of that moment. And more importantly, you never know who you'll become once you choose to stop. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness is never wasted. The person you help today might not change your life, but the habit of helping just might change you.